In the last part of this second module, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about adding JavaScript to our pages. Remember that JavaScript is part of HTML5, and many features we'll look at in this course are in fact nothing but JavaScript. So it's important to know about some of the basics we'll have to use later in the course. First of all, do not fear. Many developers are still afraid of JavaScript, certainly when they are coming, for example, from .NET. JavaScript does many things differently. That is certainly true. But it's important to look at the language and its characteristics with an open mind. And yes, to put it simple, there's no way around JavaScript when learning HTML5. There are a couple of things which are very characteristic for the language. Perhaps the most interesting one is that it is a dynamic language. Probably this is something that many developers coming from typed languages such as C# fear most. Being dynamic basically means that most of the work is done at runtime, whereas for static languages, most of the work is done at compile time. Static languages therefore catch more errors at compile time. It is also a functional language, meaning that functions in JavaScript are very powerful. They are on the same level as variables and objects. JavaScript is also an object-oriented language, which is something that many people, don't know. Objects in JavaScript exist. They have properties and methods. JavaScript objects are more dynamic of nature, however, and also JavaScript doesn't have classes like C#, for example. Most of what we will do with JavaScript is talking to the DOM, or the document object model. A browser creates an in-memory representation of the HTML document, and this model it exposes as an hierarchical tree, the DOM. We can access the individual elements of the DOM using JavaScript and manipulate them later on. Whatever change we make will be reflected automatically in the page in the browser. Most of our JavaScript code will be written against the window object. This object can be seen as an interface between our JavaScript code and the DOM. The window exposes the document property, which represents the root of the DOM. With the document property, we get access to the individual elements on the page. You can think of the document giving us access to the HTML tag on the page. On the document, a number of interesting methods are available. getElementById, getElementsByName, getElementsByTagName, and the new getElementsByClassName. Using these methods, we can ask the document to search for an element based on the arguments we pass it. In the sample code here, we have an element called shopping cart. Using the document getElementById, passing in that ID shopping cart, we get hold of that element in JavaScript code. And once we have access to the element, we can change, for example, its style attributes. Before we go to a small demo, one last thing. Where should we place our JavaScript code? It's again possible to write the JavaScript code inline, as seen here in the first sample. While this will work, it's certainly not the best practice. It leads to unreadable and unmaintainable code and also requires that the code is downloaded every time. A second approach is using a script block on the page. While this doesn't clutter our markup code, it's still being downloaded with every load of the page. Therefore, it's better, but not ideal. The third and best option is placing the code in a separate file. This file can then be referenced from the page using a script element. In the last demo of this module, we'll add some basic JavaScript to our pages. Much more JavaScript will be added in later modules. The goal of this demo is actually making sure that you have the basic understanding of how to include JavaScript and how to select elements using JavaScript. We'll be using quite a lot of JavaScript that is included with HTML5 in the upcoming modules. So I'm going to be doing something very simple in this demo. I'm going to start by adding a folder named scripts. which is typically the place where we'll place all of our JavaScript files. In this folder, I'm going to add a new JavaScript file. And let's for now call this my script. So as said, this demo is going to do something very simple. I'm going to select an element from script, and then I'm going to display, for example, an alert. So first, let's give an element an ID. Let's, for example, take one of the Add to Cart buttons. Let's take this one. I'm going to give it an ID. ID is my Add to Cart button. Now in my script, I'm going to start with a selection of this element. I'm going to use for that the document.getElementById, and I'm going to pass it the ID that I just gave to that button, which was my Add to Cart button. Now I'm going to make sure that whenever someone clicks on that button, an alert is being displayed. So I'm going to use b on click, and I'm going to attach to that a function. Now as said, I'm going to simply display for now an alert using the alert function, and then I pass in the message I want to show. Your coffee was added to your cart. To make sure that my page knows about the script, I'm going to be using a script block referencing to the JavaScript file. This brings us to the question, where do I put that script block? Now the thing is, we need to make sure that the elements that we're referencing from the JavaScript are already available in the DOM. And we can actually be sure of that at the end of the page. So below the footer, I'm going to include a script block. In HTML5, I don't have to specify that this is actually JavaScript. It is a default. So I can just say that the source is my script file inside the scripts folder. Let's now run this page. Now in the resulting site, we can actually see this script working. I can click on this Add to Cart button, which doesn't really look as a button yet. And then the alert will be shown, which means that the document.getElementById found the actual element, attached the onClick, so the script has been executed. This should give you a very basic understanding of JavaScript, how to find elements, and how to reference JavaScript files from our HTML pages. Let's go back to the slides for now. We've reached the end of this second module. In this module, we have seen how CSS can help us creating the visual part of our site. We'll see much more about CSS3 later, including that this is a very important building block of HTML5. We've also touched JavaScript briefly, covering just enough to make sure you'll be able to follow along with the following modules, where we'll be using the built-in JavaScript libraries quite a lot. So that's it for Module 2. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again in Module 3. Thanks for watching.